Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited for you all to join us today. This is a just a great opportunity for us to see each other once again, and we have an opportunity to talk more about the community needs assessment, and you'll receive some really practical skills today around facilitating focus groups that are really focused on getting the information we need to develop the Department of Children and Youth Community Needs Assessment, which will then inform our work in creating a strategic investment plan. So we thank you so much for taking some time out of your day today to join us. I just have to share a few things before we kind of jump into our agenda today. We are recording this meeting, so I just want everyone to know that, and we plan to share the information with everyone. It'll be on our website, especially for those who were unable to attend, because we want everyone to partake of this really great training and learning opportunity. We invite everyone to change their name on Zoom. So it looks like most people know how to do that. We all should be Zoom experts at this point, but you can also add, if you want to, your pronouns, if you desire to do that. And we also just like to remind attendees to mute your microphones as presenters speak. And if you have questions that arise during the training, we ask that you please include them in the chat function. We will have stopping points during the training to answer any specific questions. So we will have people who are actually monitoring the chat, so please feel free to utilize that. My name is LaShonda. I forgot to say that. I'm LaShonda White, and I am the director for the Department of Children and Youth. It is a privilege and honor all the time to do this work on behalf of Richmond residents and families and children and youth. So right now we are moving into our welcome. Well, we've done our welcome, but our introductions. And so what we are asking people to do, because we don't want to take up too much of your time, and we do want to know who is out there. So we're asking people to use the chat function to get familiar with it. If you're not, provide your name and pronoun, your organization, and your favorite part about working or living in Richmond and or North Richmond. So just a little way we may be able to share a few things that come up, but we want for you to take a moment to please do that for us. And while you're doing that, I just want to share a small amount about the Department of Children and Youth, and Patrick will do that in a little more detail a little bit later, and you'll be learning more about it as we go through this training and presentation. But the Department of Children and Youth was created as a result of the community-led initiative known as the Richmond Kids First Initiative. So a number of local Richmond nonprofit community-based organizations worked really hard to get an initiative placed on the ballot, and Richmond voters approved it. The idea was to allocate funding from the city's general fund to provide funding and support to youth serving organizations that provide support to our Richmond young people and their families. So we have been given some time since the adoption of that ballot measure to actually create the department, and this is part of that creation. So we have a board that consists of 15 board members. We have a few openings for some of our young people, but we have a 15-member board, which are really great, awesome community members that are working with us to develop this work. And then we also are, right now working really hard to do our community needs assessment work. So we want to make sure we're getting the information, the correct information. We're hearing the voice of the community, which is really essential to making sure how we allocate funding starting next July is correct, and it really speaks to the community's needs. I want to briefly introduce some of our department staff. So we have David Padilla. Many of you have received emails from him. He is a management analyst and has been really amazing, and is from the Richmond. Everyone really is from the Richmond San Pablo area, so they're very familiar with Richmond on our team, which is a great asset. So we have David Padilla. We have Patrick Seals. If you guys could wave once I say your name, that would be super awesome. Patrick, I didn't see a wave. There we go. All right. We have Guadalupe Morales. Thank you, Guadalupe. And we have three really wonderful, amazing interns. We have Callie Luke. Callie, if you could wave. Dante Miguel and Jonathan Alvarado. So with that, I want to thank everyone for sharing. And please take a moment to look at the chat and see who is on this call and the training. And I'm happy people are excited to be a part of Richmond. And I just want to say my favorite part is the people. Grew up here, love it here. I stay here and work here because of people and organizations like yours, as well as just the Richmond community. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Quaylee from HTA. The next slide, right, David?
So I'm just gonna, first of all, I'm Quaylee Kitwana, and I am the one of the consultants working, representing HTA. We were hired to come on to work with you all and partner with you all as you move through the community needs assessment and ultimately the strategic investment plan. And today I will be the facilitator trainer for our focus group training. Just to give you guys a sense of what to expect today, the purpose of this meeting is to provide some training and community partner opportunities for community members that are interested in learning more about the role of focus group in data collection as it's related to the community needs assessment. We will spend, well, we're already done, we've done most of this, but we will, do our introductions, and there will be an overview of where we are with the community needs assessment. And so you have some sense of like, where are we in this whole process? And we'll talk a little bit about the handouts that we'll be working with today. Then we're going to be moving into the facilitation of the focus group training, which is basically, like I said, an overview of the purpose of focus groups, what your role will be, either in being a facilitator for the focus group or helping to plan the focus group, and also just understanding what a focus group is and supporting your community around collecting that data and information. We'll be spending a lot of time talking about setting the tone and capturing data and why that's important for the focus groups. We'll spend some time talking about virtual challenges and how to document what's happening. And then we'll talk about moving into the next steps and moving through the whole community needs assessment. Next slide. I think it's Patrick.
Good afternoon, everyone, and just want to provide some context for why we're here today and background for those of you that may be familiar or those of you who may not be familiar. So we're entering into this community needs assessment as a consequence of measures E and K, which Shonda referenced a little while ago. The Kids First Initiative, which is really meant to support those organizations that support young people from birth to age 24. And it calls out, it calls out specifically some priority populations, which Quaylee may reference a little later. And it also speaks to the fact that the community needs test is mandated by the legislation, and it will lead to eventually a strategic investment plan. So as you can see here, we have some goals and outcomes. So the first thing that we really want to do is hear from community. And that's the whole point of the community needs assessment, is to hear from community, and that we want to hear from them in a way that is aligned with our vision and guiding principles. At a prior meeting, we had a service provider working group, and we did some community outreach and planning, and we set out some vision and guiding principles, and you can reference those on our webpage, which the link is there at the bottom of this slide here. So we encourage you to go there. We're looking to determine what the needs are in the community as it relates to young people accessing the services that they need, and what the assets are. What's working well is something that we're also interested in providing, gaining access to. As you can see, we want to complete the community needs assessment and the strategic investment plan by the end of December of this year. and then we'll be releasing the grant application so that organizations can apply for funding to support the type of work that comes out of the strategic investment plan at the very beginning of January. And ultimately, our goal is to support youth and their providers. Up until this point, I just want to highlight some of the stakeholders and players that have been participating. Obviously, the Kids First Coalition and partners are some very, very anchor organizations. The Service Provider Working Group is obviously a stakeholder. Youth in Richmond is clearly a stakeholder from birth to 24, and also Richmond and North Richmond residents. The Oversight Board, and we have some Oversight Board members here who have been integral in reviewing our consultant applications, and will ultimately be reviewing the needs assessment and the strategic investment plan, and be a part of making recommendations to the City Council as to the organizations that will receive funding in the summer of next year. Obviously, City Council is our final decision and policy maker, and they are a stakeholder and department staff, which DeShonda introduced just a little while ago. Finally, the community needs assessment process is a data collection and analysis process. And so what we've done here is that we've identified just a few areas in which we're going to be gathering data. We've already conducted some key informant interviews with some of the anchor organizations and some of those organizations that serve priority populations. We're now discussing focus groups, which you've highlighted here just for your reference. We'll be moving on to some surveys, both for service providers and also for young people, and hosting some community forums that may also not only allow for further conversation, but also maybe be targeting geographic areas, right? So what are the needs for people in central and southern areas of Richmond, and the northern areas of Richmond and North Richmond as well? And just a little bit, so there are two types of data pockets or buckets, as people often say. One is quantitative, and those are the things that can be measured. How many people live in Richmond? How much do people make? And how old are individuals in different age groups? And then you have qualitative data, which is more descriptive or categorical, which is really will be the type of data that will flow from the focus groups, right? And it answers the kind of the why, like how are you accessing and why are you accessing this type of information? So as we move forward, and Quaylee will be highlighting some of the referencing that this is a data collection process, the focus groups in particular will be looking at the how and the why and the what, which can't necessarily be quantified, but is necessary data in concert with some of the more numerical elements. Next slide. So this is just a brief timeline. If you kind of go down about a quarter way, you can see here that we're host focus groups. And so that's kind of where we sit today. We're gonna, once we initiate that, we're gonna analyze that information. We're gonna then move on to a questionnaire and or survey, as you can see, and was referenced maybe in August and early September. We're gonna be conducting community forums in August and September. And then the nitty gritty is gonna, where the rubber really meets the road, we'll do some analysis, be sharing back out to community what we found in the needs assessment, and then sharing the strategic priorities that come out of that and presenting that to council. So I'll turn it back over to Quaylee at this point.
Thank you, Patrick. Anyone have any questions about the process and the timeline, basically where we are right now? Any questions from anyone? If so, you can put it in the chat. And Aurelio, by the way, is also from HTA, is helping to facilitate the logistics of today's training.
I have a question.
Sure, Charlene.
Will the children and youth, will they be paid for these focus groups? Will they get any incentives to do them?
That's a real good question, and we will be talking about that toward the end.
Okay.
But if someone from the city want to jump in and just go ahead and respond to that, that would be great.
So
Where we're at with the decision and all of that.
So we do plan to incentivize participation, and it is something that we are budgeting for, and we're in conversations about the logistics of how we'll manage that. But it is absolutely our intent to recognize that people are making sacrifices with their time, and that we want to recognize and value that.
Right, and to point out that, again, that's part of the guiding principles for this process, is to acknowledge incentivizing is a critical part for basically for providing support to people who want to invest in their community, particularly with giving their time and sharing their experiences. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I'm just going to jump in right here and just spend some time talking a little bit about what a focus group is and when focus groups are used. So this is, generally speaking, this is very this is like related to the field of collecting data. And so what I'm going to share right here is very specific to what generally is the understood definition of what a focus group is. So the purpose of the focus group is it's a moderated, kind of data collected oriented group discussion on a very specific topic. So it's moderated, it's very specific, and it's about data collection. And the thing that we all have to keep in mind around data collection in a focus group environment is, particularly when it comes to communities, is that community members are used to gathering in very informal environments. They're used to sharing information for other purposes outside of data collection. And they're also, by the way, on the opposite side of that, when there's data collection, it's very formal and it could be pretty stiff, and someone's like filling out surveys or asking people to fill in forms. Whereas the focus group is a very relaxed, conversational environment. It should feel relaxed, it should feel comfortable, and it actually should also feel like more of a community building component for what's happening in a whole process. So I really wanted to point out how important it is for the focus groups to feel like community building. They're not just something that's imposed on a community, but it's something that community members feel engaged in. They feel like it's something that's going to be improving their community by them having some input. So what we will be doing, or what usually happens in a focus group, is data is collected about that very specific moment in time. When we say moment in time, we don't mean literally that day, but within, let's say a range of past experiences, maybe up to maybe a year back, or what's happened within the last week, or something that happened a month ago, but it's very, very contemporary to what's happening right now. It's very important to have focus groups because this is one way that we capture diverse perspectives on very specific questions and data that's happening in the community, because we know that people have different viewpoints on how things are impacting them and their communities, and particularly if they are representative of a very specific population within, in this case, within the city of Richmond or North Richmond. It's a less structured kind of interview environment where the facilitator is guiding people through conversations, and it should feel like a dialogue and a conversation as opposed to people answering questions and then that's it. The other thing about the format is that it should be a very spontaneous interaction. So sometimes it might, in many other settings when you're collecting information, you want to just like listen to what's being said, but when it comes to a focus group, it's important to be very spontaneous in your interaction. So it shouldn't feel like you're interrupting someone, but you will sometimes may have to interrupt someone because you want to capture some information, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. There will be a lot of nodding and yes and things like that happening out of it, but it'll be in a very neutral kind of tone, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. It's used to learn from the responses that are happening. So there's a lot of data collection that's happening while the focus group is taking place. So it's a learning environment. It's a place where we'll be collecting information. There'll be a lot of notes taking place. And also you may have to ask or guide the person to collect more information from them based on what they're saying. And also the other thing about the focus group is it's an opportunity to get broader perspectives not just diverse, but also broader perspectives. Sometimes people within the same population group or who have shared identities have different perspectives about what is being experienced. And so we want to make sure we collect that as well. Next slide. Focus group is going to require in this we said unbiased facilitation, but basically you're facilitating the focus group, but you're not like interjecting or will not be interjecting your opinions. You will not be agreeing with people, but you'll just keep it kind of open-ended so that people can engage and won't feel shut down, and we'll talk about that. And then the other thing about it is that, and that could be a little bit of a challenge, and we'll talk about some of that, and we'll have some cheat sheets for people and practice that a little bit today. It's a very thoughtful process in terms of who you bring in to participate, because you want to make sure that you're like representing different perspectives. And so a lot of times what has to happen is the individuals are expected, we have to be thoughtful about who we're bringing into a focus group and why we're bringing them into the focus group in terms of their ability to provide some perspective. And that can get a little tricky. Luckily, the focus group is only, as you saw when Patrick put the slide up, is one component for collecting data for this process. We also will have community forums. So we will have surveys, so people won't be left out, but the focus group is as it's called, it's a very focused way of getting information from a very specific group of people. So now we're in this environment, right, where we're not typically when a focus group happens, it's in a room and people are in a room together, and there's some, some sense of security around that because you're just speaking to those people that are sitting in the room. Well, these times we all know that when you're on video, anybody could be taping you or copying what you say or picking information out. And we will have there is a process for confidentiality, and we'll talk about that, but it's still a vulnerable environment. It's a very vulnerable environment, and we have to acknowledge that's a challenge around doing focus groups and the ways that we will be doing it. So I have a question for you all, and I would like for people to give me a sense of that. When you think about what I've just said about what focus groups are and how we talked about this whole process, I'm wondering what people think what some of the anticipated unique challenges might be for Richmond to be going through a focus group process and forming focus groups and having people in a room. Are there any unique challenges that you all think would possibly be anticipated or could come up? Every community isn't the same, and each community has some or possibly unique things. Some of it could be related to past experiences around survey and data collection. Any anticipated challenges from anyone? And right now we're experiencing a challenge in that in a focus group, it's that quiet space that can be really challenging. And if you're in a community where people aren't used to kind of stepping up, you know, into the space, or giving space for other people, particularly when people are leaders, a lot of times they're used to like making space for other people or letting other people talk before they jump in. And one of the things that is going to be important for the focus group is to prepare people for understanding how important it is for their voices to be heard. Any other anticipated challenges for Richmond around doing focus groups?
I think especially during these times is probably folks that we're probably needing more of their input from for these engagements. So, you know, we'll probably have the regular participants who are actively engaged. And I feel like in order to formulate something that's more equitable, you know, it's like, how do we reach folks that are currently disengaged? So I see that as a potential challenge.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that, thank you for sharing that. And I think that one of the things around that is making sure that we have representative focus groups, and making sure, the thing about the focus groups, and I'll talk about this as we go forward, is that they will be very specific to populations, so we can narrow it down. So some of that vulnerability will be pulled away, and having opportunities for people whose voices aren't normally heard to have a space to articulate is going to be important. Yeah. Anyone else? Other challenges we can anticipate? What about challenges related to COVID-19? What comes to mind doing focus groups? Now imagine, you know, we're doing a focus groups on the video. What do you think some of you may have already experienced some of the potential challenges around COVID-19?
I think technology is obviously
Yeah.
probably the top issue for each of us. Making sure that folks can access, and, you know, just ensuring that folks have capability or know how to access a Zoom call or something like that if they need to chat or whatnot from their phone.
That's a real good one. I mean, I've seen a lot of people adapt the video formatting or I guess like platforms that they're using based on the specific group of people that they're bringing together. Especially if individuals are using phones. Yes, Aurelia?
Yeah, there was a comment from Ruthie. She mentioned childcare needs.
That's a real good one. Yeah. So if you're in a focus group at home, which is different from literally walking away and going into a place to have a meeting, at home, it's a whole different factor. Exactly.
There's another comment from Martine. She mentioned translation.
Yeah, translation and cultural competency. Yeah. So when we're planning the focus groups, these are the kind of things that we need to be aware of and addressing to make sure that we're able to allow for people to have their voices heard and not having to have to address those challenges in the space or even not participate because they have those challenges. So the more we anticipate and the more we think about these challenges as we go forward, the better opportunity we provide for people to actually engage and be involved in the focus groups, which is important for the data collection.
Another challenge mentioned was getting young people involved, and facilitation via a platform poses different engagement challenges. So like keeping people engaged and generating a robust conversation.
That's great. Anyone else? Even about some of the things that were already mentioned, any other comments about those things, or does that bring to mind some some other anticipated challenges that we could have as we go forward. And again, the thing to remember is the reason we have to think about challenges is that helps us to be prepared. So part of preparing yourself is thinking about all the possible challenges that you may have to be dealing with. And I'm sure as we go through the training today, you'll be thinking about more, but it's, just try to keep your brain, working around, okay, this could be a potential challenge. I am anticipating this. Whether it happens or not is not important, but being prepared for it is very important. Looks like Tamisha had a question.
Yeah, she mentioned, will outreach be hard for hard to reach populations in the city be a challenge?
Yeah, that's good. And that's one of the reasons we have to look at either the current CBOs, or sometimes it's non-traditional ways that people gather to bring people into the process. Okay, good. So again, the whole purpose of this part is to help you to understand why it's important to anticipate possible challenges. Let's go to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, just talking a little bit about the focus group participants. A focus group is usually 6 to 8 people who are coming together to be a part of this protocol, this session, to collect this data. Why do you imagine focus groups are so small? What do people think about that? Why do you imagine that it's 6 to 8 people and not 20? And some of you can speak from your experiences because maybe you've been in a focus group. Yeah, Dan, vulnerability. Say more about that. You can come on. You can unmute yourself.
Well, especially if we're gonna involve youth. Sorry. They might feel, yeah, maybe not used to being asked to participate in stuff like this and be on a video chat with a bunch of adults who are gathering data. And so if there's a smaller group, it might make them feel like, yeah, more able to speak up.
Yeah, I like what they're saying. That's true, that a smaller group allows for people to feel secure about sharing of information. And also,
I think,
oh, go ahead.
this is Tamara. I think also it helps you stay focused. If you have so many people involved, then now you have 20 different opinions, and more times than not, you're pretty much the same opinion. But I think it's just easier to stay focused and stay committed when there's a smaller group.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. Tamisha raising her hand. You can open your mic, Tamisha.
Yeah, I just wanted to, in our experience as researchers in the community, the smaller the group, the better. We do no more than 10, no less than 5, and it really adds great context to the conversation. Mm-hmm. We also have 2 facilitators, somebody who could really lead the dialogue while somebody else tracks what's being said. And that really helps in the 10-person focus groups. Mm-hmm. The thing that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about focus groups now, as our organization is still doing that work, is that when we did focus groups with young people from West Contra Costa, over 119, mm-hmm. There was an incentive. So I'm always worried about hard to reach populations that are already hard enough to engage before COVID. And so now it's sometimes you have to have incentives to get folks to the table. And so how do you do that in a time like this when normally you would provide food or gift cards, but those are some other things that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about focus groups, how important this work seems to be and hard to reach populations.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's a really good point. I'm glad you bring that up about the role of an incentive. And also, you know, when I think about the guiding principles that around this whole project is, it's one way of letting people know that they're valued, you know, and their opinion is valued by compensating them in some way. So, you know, we got to keep remembering, I like what you're saying, because it's all about the community building. That this is, you know, we're doing this process, but it's long-term. We're building relationships. We're connecting with each other. People are feeling invested in what's happening. They feel ownership of it. So having small groups of people, having people come together, incentivizing it, valuing people is a critical part of it. Let's move to the other part about one of the elements of a focus group participant. You know, they should all have a reason to be together in that space, in that focus group. Usually it's because either they have a shared issue area that they're focused on. Maybe there's a demographic focus that they have in common with each other, or even a geographic connection. They're all from the same neighborhood, or they all live in the same district, or they're all Asian Pacific Islanders, or they're all transitional youth. And maybe even more specific than that, you know, but there's a reason for why they're all in the group, because getting back to, I think it was Tamara who mentioned it earlier about how important it is to have context that people can feel connected to and have a deeper conversation around. And when you have a smaller group and people feel connected to each other, the ability to collect data and information that's very focused is more likely to happen. So people have examples of situations where they've been in either where, because they had the same people in the room, the ability to collect really good information, or maybe there was a situation where, because there were different people in the room, there was a different kind of a result from what happened in the space.
There was another comment from Kristen. She mentioned the data needs to be equitable. In terms of technology, the data will be way off if we only reach young people with a computer.
Yeah.
She mentioned that she ran into this when she worked in a sociology class project, make everything accessible on a cell phone or FaceTime, or phone, and so on.
Right. And this really speaks to the planning of the focus groups. You know, when you, today is focused on understanding the purpose of the focus group, but once you guys start moving into planning the focus groups, those are the kind of things that are going to be very important to talk about. Other comments?
Yeah, I just typed in that we're gonna need data in Spanish and English. And will you guys be creating the data, or do we have to create it ourselves?
Right, so we'll be providing the support for that.
Okay.
Definitely, and you guys might help us with some of it depending on whether you have someone already in your organization that the group of people are familiar with. We don't need to bring new people in if we don't have to. So it may turn out that, you know, your focus group or your organization may decide that in your planning process that you want to go with what you normally would use. But definitely, if you don't have someone, we will definitely make sure that that can happen. So moving to the next focus group participant component, I want to say that while we want to have people to be incentivized, we don't want that to be a single motive for participating in a focus group. And while I know that could be obvious to some of us about why, I would like to hear a couple of comments about what people think about why that's an important thing to flag here.
It's Tamisha. I think for the challenge that we always think through is like, are we gonna get, like, are people just gonna answer the questions the way you want them to answer because they're getting an incentive to be there? Are they gonna be authentic or truthful? Or if they're just there for the incentive and not authentically engaged and just kind of going through the motions to get the incentive? And so those have been the challenges, but then also another challenge for us is that we also don't want to offend people either, because somebody else's time is just as valuable as mine. And so we want to make sure that the incentive matches the time that we're asking people for. So I think we consider all of that, but what has helped us in the past is that we try as hard as we can to engage everybody that we already have a relationship with. So if we have relationship or proximity to them, they already trust us, and we kind of know that they will be interested in like going deeper in a focus group setting, then we engage those folks first. And the second wave is anybody they might know who we didn't have in the room, and we take recommendations from them. So that's how we have done it in the past. But again, we're in the age of COVID-19. I'm not really sure, especially with people's limited capacity for technology, which we're also learning right now. I don't know what the challenges will be today.
Right. One of the biggest things I'm pulling out, thank you for sharing that, because I'm pulling out the theme about accountability. So when we recruit people to participate, the whole thing around having that relationship already there, or having people in the group who have a relationship with someone that you all have a relationship with. So that's, where that accountability comes into play. But the recruitment part, in terms of when you reach out to people and ask them to be involved, helping them to understand what the expectations are, what they will be doing, encouraging them to come ready to participate, helping them to understand that it's a small group and your voice is going to be heard, and it's important that that you make a commitment to coming and participating fully in what's happening in the space. I think I saw a couple other hands.
Yeah, there were a couple more comments around the data collection. Yeah, like not having like different platforms available for you in the community, so that the data collecting should, I guess, to prevent data collected from being off topic, and also informing folks of the long-term impact and not just short-term reward.
Yes.
Knowing how to frame that.
Yes, that's good. That's good. All right, next slide. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what the focus group agenda typically looks like. And the thing, I'm just going to go over this, but, and I'll add more at the end about this. So typically what we're expecting for a focus group is probably going to be about an hour and a half. So you're preparing people to participate in a focus group that's going to take about an hour and a half. And what we're going to be doing is you are going to make sure that people have, the handouts already, that they understand like what the purpose of the focus group is. You're really going to orientate them to what's happening before they get into the space. You're going to make it very clear to them that that the space is all ready for recording, and that they will be in a space where the information is going to be collected based on what they're saying. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Obviously, as always, we'll be talking about the focus group ground rules so that everybody in the whole group understand what the ground rules are or what the agreements are, whatever you're going to be using the language that's familiar to people in the space. You will be noting to them that there is a specific priority population or demographic that this particular group is focused on. So that's one way of keeping people on topic, is reminding them, particularly when you recruit them and then in the email and then when they come into the space, keeping up with reminding them how important it is that they know what that particular topic area is going to be about. Then there'll be a 10-minute icebreaker. Then you'll start with the focus group questions and into the protocol, and I'll talk about that more. And then there'll be a wrap up. So there's a very generic looking agenda that you will be working with, and the specifics will be in the protocol. So I want to bring to your attention, if we will, you have a handout, and everybody should have received these handouts. And the name of this particular handout that I want to bring to your attention is the one that says, it's the protocol. What's the name of this handout? Sorry, guys. Focus group protocol. Focus group protocol is the name of the handout. Did everyone get that handout? Just raise your hand. Hit the, everybody have it? I'm seeing nods.
I think it might be the facilitation cheat sheet.
No, the one that says focus group protocol. Did everyone get that one? Okay. So I want to bring to your attention how important it is to understand that there is a protocol for a focus group. Just like with any other data collection process, the protocol for the focus group is a very succinct sequence way that you go through the process of collecting the information in the focus group. Okay?
Quayle?
Yes.
I don't think we shared the protocol, but we did share the
agenda.
The one with the agenda, which is called the facilitation cheat sheet, which is handout 2.
Okay, that's okay. Focus group. All right, yes, let's go with that one. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're familiar with this whole process, because this is important. And of course, when you're planning and going literally into designing your focus group, we'll get into more details about this, but I want to just bring this to your attention. So it's going to be important to you to understand how important it is for you to be prepared to run your focus groups, which means that literally you familiarize yourself with all of the information, particularly the agenda. And you're going to receive what we're calling a protocol, which is a list of questions that you will be asking in the focus group in a very specific sequence. So we will be presenting that to you. And then we want to let you know that it's going to be important to remind people how important it is that their voices will be heard, and for them to make sure that their opinions are heard, and that you introduce the agreement, and that you're going to be making sure that the entire time you're being engaging and upbeat and keeping people involved in what's going on. Particularly hard to do when you're in a virtual environment. What I do a lot of times is I you know, we have the faces up here, and I might scroll through to see, you know, that people are paying attention and that I'm still capturing, you know, the attention of the people in the space. And this is one way that we make sure that we get good information. Luckily, you only have 6 to 8 people in the room, and so it'll be much easier for you to do that. And we're going to ask that you, and we'll talk about this in your planning process, but we are going to ask that we ask people to have their video engaged. So basically making sure that their faces are on the screen and not the black box with their name in it, because that's, you know, going to be really important that they do that. You will be making sure that during the focus group, one of the things that you're going to be doing is taking notes, and we'll talk about that. But generally speaking, this is what your agenda is going to look like. Next slide. So, okay, so now we know the agenda. Now we know who's going to be in the room. Now we're clear about why we have them in the room, and we also are very clear about what the purpose of the focus group is. So now let's think about what your role is as the person, or your role in understanding what the role of the facilitator is. All of you won't necessarily be facilitating, I understand that, but understanding the role of the focus group and the role of the facilitator is going to help you with planning your focus groups and also identifying people to participate in the focus group. So your role in the focus group is to collect the data in a very particular sequence. I keep bringing up, and we're going to keep bringing up, how important it is to understand that you are collecting data. You're not running a meeting or a session. I mean, you're doing that, but the purpose of it is to collect the information and to collect the data. You will be guiding the participants through a trusted process, which basically means that what you're doing is making them want to trust the process. And that is what you're doing from the very beginning in terms of asking them to get involved and recruiting them all the way until they get into the space, and then how you deliver the protocol and getting them involved. So it's going to be important that, you know, that you understand that it is your responsibility to guide them through this trusted process. And then your role is obviously to keep people engaged and make sure that people are conversational. And some of that means that you might have to take clues from what you might be seeing in the space and what's happening in the space, and asking questions to pull information out of them, and asking them to explain their answers, and drawing more and more information out of them. But at the same time, making sure that you're neutral. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when we get to the next slide. But that's really important, to not influence what's being said by agreeing or disagreeing or having opinions that you're inserting into the process. So as a facilitator, your responsibility is to remain neutral in guiding the conversation.
And I just want to call out one point for those of you that are following. If you reference the ensuring productive group facilitation, that's kind of where Quaylee is kind of drawing from. So if you want to take notes and or follow along and reference in more detail what she's referring to handout number 3.
Yes. And then just so you know, in that handout, there are also like little snippet tips about how to move things along and follow the protocol. So, and it was recommended as part of this process is to provide you all with tools that could give you an opportunity to learn a couple of tips about how to facilitate. And some of you are good meeting facilitators. You go into the meeting with an agenda to move a particular agenda item. And in this case, your responsibility is to collect the information. So you're facilitating a process where you will be collecting information. And then, of course, as a facilitator or co-facilitator, your responsibility will be to capture notes about what people are saying. And obviously, that's part of collecting the data. Next slide. So one of the things I want to talk a little bit about here, and I like to see if you guys have some of your own actually, I would like to get a sense of how many people have participated in a focus group before. Actually participated. Can you make a note in the chat, and then I will have a sense of that. Okay. So can some of you who have participated in a focus group talk a little bit about your experience, what it felt like to be a participant? In that particular focus group that you were in, just kind of think about one of the focus groups and then think about your experiences. Who'd like to go?
I'll go.
Sure.
Well, when we did ours, it was with some doctors from, let me see, I forgot where they were from. They were national doctors, and I felt like it was part of, we was being studied, which we really were. And, but it was cool because they paid us all. And we were honest. Some of us was too honest. A lot of people said, where did you get all these crazy people? Because some people was really honest and they didn't like it because they felt like we was under a study, and we were. We really were.
You know, this is typically, that's a typical experience sometimes, when it's particularly when it's around like marketing for a company. Was it a company? You said it was a medical?
No, it was doctors. It was national doctors.
And so that felt like you were being studied. Other people?
Were actually being studied. Yes. But we got paid good.
Other people, your experience.
I'll go next. I worked on a focus group for a charter school. Well, the focus group was to determine, first of all, if we should add another charter school. This is when I lived in Las Vegas, and it's been quite a few years now. But anyway, so the focus was on whether we should actually have another one, and then the focus was on the curriculum and how to be more successful than some of the other charter schools that were already there. So it was creating curriculum, and after deciding that, yes, we thought it was a good idea because of their track record. And then our focus was on the kids and the curriculum. And there were, I think there were 10 of us, and it worked out really well. I mean, like I said earlier, I think because it's small, you can actually focus on the problem, and there aren't that, 72 different opinions, so it makes it a little easier. So it was a good group. I really enjoyed it, and we did a lot of things, and it's still there. Actually, that was about 20 years ago, but the school's still there, which is nice.
Right. So did it feel, the fact that it was small seemed important to you because you brought it up a couple of times in describing it?
I've been in meetings, not so much focus group, but the more folks, depending on what your topic is, you can lose the focus. Right. So with the smaller groups, I mean, because, everybody has an opinion, and, with more people, then you aren't focused, if you will. People have a tendency to start talking about other things that have nothing to do with what you're talking about. But at any rate, I do think my experience has been good. So yeah, I can see why having a focus group does help. Like I say, it keeps you focused.
Well,
Or
it
it's
looks like
easier to stay
people,
focused.
yeah, it looks like people are agreeing with you about other folks in the training are agreeing with you about the small part and why that's so important. And I think I saw that Teresa had a question. Teresa?
It was a comment. So you mentioned while participating, it was interesting to see that others had like the same ideas, feelings as she did.
Yes, that's right. Why is that important? Who said that?
Teresa?
Teresa, why was that important an observation for you? Can Teresa get on her mic, or is that?
Uh-oh.
Oh, she can't. Okay, that's fine.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. For me, it was important to know that I wasn't the only one that had that same mindset or thinking the same way. So I was able to connect with people. People were able to connect with me, and we were able to actually form some relationships just from being in the room with each other. And I think it's important that you do that in focus groups, because again, you don't feel so alone. You realize, well, you know, I'm not alone. I feel this way, and so do other people.
Mm-hmm. That's really good, because if you notice, we're collecting, as Patrick pointed out, we're collecting the input into the community needs assessment in several different formats. And that's a very specific role of the focus group, is to do community building and to help people see that they do have common interests or concerns, or that, you know, that they have an opportunity to innovate something that's coming forward, which is something I think that Tamara brought up. Is like, it felt really good to be engaged at that level. So, you know, in doing this, again, it's not just about collecting the data, because, and that's an important part, but we want to remember why we're doing it in this way is an important part as well.
And there was another comment. You can go ahead.
I was just going to add to my comment about the connection. We were also able to understand that other people don't feel things and view things the way that we did. And it's okay to agree to disagree. And that even gave us more opportunity to talk about our personal experiences and why we have the feelings that we have and why they have the feelings that they have.
Right.
And even though we still, you know, we understood it, but we still didn't agree on it, but we could still be in the same room and, you know, connect with each other.
Yep.
In spite of that. So that's the other exciting thing about focus groups, which is what we need more of anyway. People being understanding of other people and their experiences and how they are navigating those experiences in their lives.
Right. I think that that's like a real good example of why it's so important to articulate exactly what you guys are articulating when you're recruiting people, like the value added of participating. So the focus isn't just on the incentive, although there shouldn't be any shame in the fact that someone is motivated by an incentive, but not singly. Let's go to the next slide. We've already talked about this one. So, but before we do this, let me just see if there were other comments. Did people have other comments about their experiences? I see that there's quite a bit populated here.
Yeah, there were a couple more. Liz mentioned that she participated in a larger group, about 30 people, but it was split into half, and they went pretty well. She mentioned also Lashonda had a great experience. The focus group felt very conversational. They didn't feel study and was even therapeutic.
Yeah.
And they felt that their voices and stories was important to share.
Yes. You know, this is the thing I really want to talk a little bit about that. Feeling like their voices and stories are important to share. We're working with a lot of community members, which is obviously the whole point of this initiative is we're working with community members whose voices haven't been heard or their stories haven't been heard. And so every format that we allow for them, particularly a format like a focus group to tell their story, is validating. Now, while we may not necessarily have them to like, you know, go into, like we talk about like it being therapeutic and all of that. We don't want people exposing things about themselves personally because, you know, obviously there's like a lot of confidentiality, but at the same time, generally speaking, you know, having voices heard and the stories about what's happening to young people in our community is very important. Okay. So while I have you all chatty and we've reviewed the agenda, I'm wondering if you all, this is this thing about this whole virtual thing, right? We're going to have to kick off these meetings with people introducing themselves. And in the focus group, we'll have about 10 minutes for that to happen. And it's always tricky when you have introductions in a focus group when it's in, I guess, in real spaces or what do we call these spaces now when we actually get together for real? But then you always have to be like, okay, for, you know, everybody gets 1 minute to do whatever it is you want to do. And that time just goes on and on and on. And before you know it, you know, you've used up a lot of your time. And I know we're getting better at virtual introductions. And I like to hear some examples of things that people have done in virtual spaces over the last few months of introductions that you've seen.
Okay, can you say that again? I didn't quite get it. Sorry.
Give me an example of a virtual introduction. So introductions, like you do the welcome and the introduction. And how are people introducing themselves in these spaces? Some examples of things that you're seeing over Zoom, just to, let's just put it that way. Some Zoom introductions.
Well, I've been in a number of them, and they just go, they'll start with a person. Usually they pick people only because, you know, you can't go by the pictures or by the icons because they shift as people come in. So they just say, I mean, so tomorrow they know I'm on, introduce yourself. So they just look at the pictures. The host looks at the people who are on there and ask them. And if there's a phone number, then they say, with 510 da da da, would you introduce yourself, like that. That's the only way I've seen it done. If there are some more clever ways, then that's cool.
Yeah, that's what I want to hear. If people have seen clever, you know, I like the word you used there, Tamara, clever ways of doing introductions.
Well, one more. Actually, in another meeting, actually in this one I do every Saturday, as they come on, we just say who we are. You know, you kind of interrupt folks, but most of the people are pretty good about getting there, at least by, let's say, 5 after whatever the hour is that the meeting is scheduled, and just introduce themselves as they come in. I forgot my Saturday meetings like that.
I'd say since this is a smaller group and it's a more intimate, we could probably go a little beyond just your name, and maybe there's like some question that people can answer, or
oh yeah, we do that. I mean, for the most part in the new meetings, right, you can state your name and what you do and why you're there, or, you know, if you're whatever you are, that sort of thing. But and usually you try to leave it no more than what, 2 minutes at the most.
Right. So we have, if you have 10 minutes for the introduction and there are 8 people, then the time
right
to get on. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
Doing that training math. It looks like Elise has a suggestion. And I also see Stephanie has one. Stephanie, tell me more about what you're suggesting here, or what you've seen.
On one of one, I forgot what the topic was, but it was just back to like our childhood memories. So one of them was just bring a baby picture to see if we can tell if it's you or not. And then another one was just like in grade school, like depending on the elementary you were from, we were interested to find like different states that we all came from.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like fun. Elise?
Yes, hey everybody. I attended a facilitation where before the facilitation there was a Google link that was shared. So, and then when we entered in, the Google link was on the chat. We were directed to the chat so that folks were clicking on the Google link and there was a prepared slide and everybody, there was like little Post-its or little shapes. So there was like hearts and stars and people got to like type in their name, what organization they were from, their pronouns and stuff on the little hearts and then pin them on the slide. So everybody was working on it together at the same time. And it was just fun and interactive and everybody seemed to enjoy it.
Yeah, that's good. I've seen that where it's this interactive thing that happens, you know, in the space where people come in and they pop it in. And you also mentioned something about another one is to start with a poll. So the whole point here is to be creative because we're setting the tone for the focus group with the introductions, and we can also help people to connect with each other at the very beginning. Okay, next slide. We want to make sure that we make it clear to people, you know, the whole, you know, one mic and one person speaking at a time. At the same time, and I've said this to people, you know, at the same time, if you get really excited, it's okay to, you know, to use that energy to, you know, to be passionate in the space and hold the thought, but be ready to, you know, jump in there. So it's conversational, but we don't want to shut people down by saying one mic. Making sure that everybody is very clear about, you know, how much they're valued in the space and what they have to say and offer, and making sure that they know that we're interested in not just the good stuff, especially when you're working with, like someone mentioned this earlier, that when you're collecting information or getting feedback from young adults or youth, and there's, you know, an adult running it, or maybe even another young adult running it. But sometimes people get confused about what the purpose of the focus group is, and that it's not just about collecting all the good stuff. You know, we also want to know like other challenges or anything that they want to share about a negative experience or something that they had, that's incredibly valuable in terms of informing the data that we need to collect. Next slide. So it's going to be important to follow the protocol. When I said protocol or guide, it's basically what you will have in front of you and you will be using to guide the conversation, the questions you will be asking. And it's important because this is how we meet our obligation to collect the data. And then also, this is how we make sure that we're getting data that's insightful and can help us to understand what people are presenting, by making sure that we're following the protocol and we're following up with appropriate ways to pull the information out of people. We want to make sure that we keep the people engaged, you know, the participants engaged with each other, not just with, you know, the trainer or the facilitator, but also with each other. So by doing that, one of the ways you would do that, and I'll talk to this more, is to say, you know, in building off of what, you know, and building off of what Dante just said, are there other people who have something to share on that particular point? So that's how we're helping them to stay connected, by guiding them or weaving the conversation so that they understand that it's not just what you have to say and what you have to say, but it's like if there's an opportunity to build off of what someone else said, then we'll do that, and that'll happen. But also staying on topic, and someone mentioned this earlier about how to stay on topic, and we have a dealing with challenging situations cheat sheet, and we will make that available to everyone. And I want to point out to you all that some of these scenarios that I'm bringing up, there's some very facilitative personalities, you know, that come up in focus groups. Now, if you're a trained facilitator, you understand that, but if you are a young person and you see some of these personalities listed on a cheat sheet, then it could seem like it's something negative, and you know, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So, for example, find my cheat sheet here, and we'll make this available to you. And basically, what we're calling this is, you know, focus group challenges and challenging participants. So we just call it, like, you know, some of it could be someone who's very, very excited about a lot of ideas that they have. And what do you think could happen when you have someone coming into a space with a lot of ideas and ready to like pour them all on the table when you have 6 to 8 people in a room? What kind of challenge could that bring?
To me, that'll bring a lot of challenges. And I want to also ask, what age groups are you guys have you determined? What age groups?
Right. So on the age groups, it's going to be, I think we had, actually, David, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I know for age groups, especially with the community needs assessment, really looking at ages, you know, from birth to 24. I think part of that is also understanding that may also include, for example, parents, and also, you know, for example, teens. And I think at least when it comes to focus groups, we're really trying to look at, you know, especially, for example, the 0 to 5 population, like what's the best way to get input from that. So I think we're continuing to look at that, but we definitely want to be mindful that even though it's focused on children and youth, we understand that it goes beyond that as well when it comes to elders and mentors and guardians, for example.
David, can I ask you, can a youth be a facilitator in one of these focus groups?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely. And that's why we're doing this training today, so that you all know what it's going to mean and require, and what the expectation will be for that youth. But in your planning meeting for your focus group is when we'll get into the details and provide some additional support for that person, and including maybe even role playing with that person to help them get through some of the focus group protocol. So going back to challenging situations, I'm wondering what people think about that. Like if someone came in, let me give you another one. How about this? What if you had someone in the group who was more of a, you know, for the sake of argument, you know, I'm going to say this. And that person is constantly saying that in a group. What kind of challenge could that bring into a focus group environment?
Oh, shoot.
I mean, one of the things I can imagine, or I've seen where how that plays out, is it can actually shut down other people, you know, when that happens. So in terms of how you would deal with a person like that this is the reason why it's so important to have a really good recruitment process. So the main thing you want to do is try to avoid having that person come into the space, because it can actually, impact the focus group. And unfortunately, that would mean that we wouldn't yield a lot of data. However, if the person was to come into the room and you were facilitating the focus group and this was happening, then you would let that person know how important it is that we hear from them and that we appreciate, their thoughts and their feedback, and that is super valuable. But at the same time, letting them know that we want to also encourage other people to share their thoughts and their experiences, and how important it is to have a range of ideas and opinions and thoughts happening in the space, because it's going to make for a better outcome for the community needs assessment. And I'll tell you this, the one thing about that, when you say something like that in the space, that's actually a way to empower the other people in the space, to give them a sense that you're recognizing that this person could be taking up too much space, or that this person is bringing a negative perspective into the space and shutting down. And by you as the facilitator, letting that person know that they're important and what they have to say is critical, and that we also want to hear from other people, that's opening up the space so other people can step up and talk without necessarily cutting that person off. And there have been situations where I've asked people to share that information literally with me afterwards, in another environment. Like, you have a lot to share. This is very helpful, but, I want to get other opinions. And so, please, hold that or keep those notes, and we can talk about this later.
There were a couple of comments. So Teresa mentioned that you could also invite that person to write down their thoughts and share it with the facilitators.
Yes.
And there was a question from Dan, mentioned, does a talking circle format work?
Say more. You mean when you let everybody talk, each person say something? Say more, Ben.
Yeah. I haven't thought about it, or I haven't participated in a virtual setting, but you have an object, and in order to talk, you have to be holding that object. And you ask a question, and then you pass that object around and let people kind of talk in a circle, pass it around in a circle that way. And, if someone wants to pass, they can, but, we obviously encourage people to talk. But yeah, I'm just wondering if that kind of format is done in a focus group, or if that's if it's more of like a conversation. And
yeah, it's more of a conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more of a conversation and spontaneous.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I will be sharing this particular handout with you all. Again, I want to remind you that it could read pretty negative, and so be careful about how you disperse it or use it. But at the same time, these are personalities that come out, or challenges, I should say, that come out. All of them are good on one level, but it also could be challenging in a space where you're trying to collect information from a diverse group of people in a very set amount of time. And we want to make sure, that all the voices are heard and people feel comfortable to participate. But again, going back to sometimes many of these things can be anticipated before you go into the group, and based on how you recruit people to participate. I can't overemphasize that. Next slide. Okay, so now we're getting into the use of neutral language in response to comments. So, because we are data collecting as the facilitator of the focus group, one of the most important skills to take into this session is to use as much neutral language as possible as you're going through the protocol, because you can easily influence what happens if you don't use neutral language. So for example, if you say things like, oh, that's a great idea, or, you know, oh, I agree with that, or good, that's good, then you're influencing what's happening in the space, okay? So it's a tricky facilitation tool for focus groups, because on one hand, we're asking you to stay upbeat and positive and engaging, and on the other hand, we're saying, but keep it neutral, right? So we have a very something that we try to promote people to do is, and that is for them to really practice this ahead of time. And again, when you're planning your session, this is something, you know, I'll be going over with you all if you're actually going to be a facilitator of the focus group, practicing some good examples about how to respond to people when you want to remain neutral, because you don't want to influence the data that's being collected. And also how to draw the information out of people in a very neutral way. So some examples of some of the things that you could be saying, right, would include things like, you know, say a little more about that, which is different from saying, I like what you're saying, can you say more, right? So you would be asking them to say more about it because you want to draw more information about what they're saying, but you will not be agreeing with what they're saying. Why is that important? Because somebody else in the group may not agree with it. And so we've already, as the facilitator, we've, you know, influenced some of what could be coming out of the space, okay? We can ask people to give us examples. It is going to be important, particularly if there are underage people in the room, to not ask, to have them, to not encourage examples about their personal life. You know, that's so important, because we don't want people to be, we don't, first of all, it's inappropriate, you know, to have people sharing publicly things about their personal life in spaces for data collection. We don't really, that's not our role here. But they can share experiences generally about what they understand about the impact of a very specific thing around people who they might be representing in this group. So for example, if there are some people who are involved in the, let's say it was a LGBTQ plus group, we don't necessarily need them to talk about their own personal experiences, but they may want to share commonly expressed or common understandings about what they believe is happening to people who are impacted by that demographic on a particular question that we're asking. Any questions about this? I'm going to move to an example, an exercise around this, okay? Next slide. So let's say that we ask the general question at the beginning of the protocol when we say, when students are involved in activities outside of school, it can help them succeed in school and life and prepare them for success. Many students do not participate in existing out of school activities or services. So that's the setup for the protocol of questions that will be asked. So what I would like for you all to do is to think about if you were addressing this in a neutral way and drawing out information. So I want you to think about this. If you're asking the question, what type of activities or programs are Richmond youth more likely to use? That's the question, right? That's the question. How are we going to go about pulling out and exploring very specifically information about that from the group without influencing what is being said? So you're asking this question to the group: what type of activities or programs are Richmond youth more likely to use? Right? So think about let me think about this. Let's think about a very specific, each of you, I want all of you on the in the training to think about a very specific demographic. So that demographic could be an issue area, a group of people who have something in common, or maybe a geographic area. And you're asking them this question. So you may say, for example, what type of activities or programs are LGBTQ plus youth more likely to use? So now you're asking them this question and they're answering the question. Someone give me some example of how you might use one of these bullets to draw more information from the focus group. Neutrally, by the way. How about someone give me an example of what you think someone might say? And this is just an example. It doesn't have to be like real. It could be like, what you think someone fictitiously might say.
I think, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I think a youth might say that they participate in the RISE Center.
Okay.
That is where most likely LGBTQ and other youth might participate. Am I answering your question correctly?
Yeah. So that's probably what they'll say. They'll say something very straightforward like that. So now how are we going to pull out? People give examples of how we're going to pull more information out of that response. Because see, that's probably the way people will respond, right? So give me some example of how you think you can neutrally pull more information out of that response. Did I see some hands?
My internet keeps going in and out because I'm driving now, but what I was going to say about the earlier question was I would locate the LGBT groups around and find out what's being successful, what has been successful for them.
Right, but we're in a focus group and we have our 8. We've already had the RISE Center, for example, to form a focus group for us of 8 LGBTQ plus young people. And we're asking them this question. And they say, which someone mentioned, that the response could be that they would say, activities at the RISE Center. Yes, Dan.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say the same thing. What does the RISE Center, what kind of services does the RISE Center provide to you or for you?
Mm-hmm.
And Teresa had a comment.
Sure.
Tell me more. You could say, tell me more about the RISE Center.
That's a good one. Tell me more about the RISE Center. And what could be a follow-up to that, the tell me more, if you get the dead face, even on that? Teresa, how do you feel? I can't really, what is she saying? Teresa saying?
How do you feel in the space at the Rice Center?
Mm-hmm.
In the space at the Rice Center.
How do you feel in the space? Yes. How often do you participate in these activities? Yes. That's a good one. Someone else added.
What activities do you specifically participate in?
What? Yes. That's a good one. Or what activities are youth most engaged in? You know, so it's not just about them, but it's also about in generally LGBTQ youth. What about the question of why do you think these programs are important? Or how do you know, what do you think youth, instead of saying, how do you think youth benefit, you could say, you know, how do you think participating in these programs impact people's lives? Or, you know, just something, you know, literally, instead of saying that it benefit, because it may not, some of them may feel like, well, yeah, I mean, it does, but so we're only talking about programs that benefit. You know, what do you envision when you think about what's possible, you know, that you could be doing at the center? So it's going to be important to like really, really, really draw out these questions, because that's how what are we collecting when we say this? Now that we have these questions that we're asking, what data do you think we're able to pull out of them? Someone needs to turn their mic off. I think that might be Tamara. What data? Tamara? Oh, she can't. Okay, she did. All right. What data are we pulling out with those questions we just asked? You know, Patrick, you made a comment very early on about qualitative data. What's some of the qualitative data that we're pulling out of these answers?
Sorry. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. That we're pulling out with these questions?
Yeah.
Oh.
Or even in their responses.
We're gonna get to what, why, my motivations, experiences, the values that may exist in the program that I'll highlight as a consequence of sharing, that people there have always made me feel welcome, or I felt safe, right? And so those are things that don't come out in numbers, don't come out with how much money you make or how old you are. And so those are things that are exceptional data points, especially when we're talking about needs and how to prioritize what type of programming is necessary to support young people from a particular population.
That's good, yeah. So I'm hoping that based on what Patrick said, you guys are able to see the difference in collecting information in the focus group. And how do you imagine, if we're collecting information like this is to the entire group, anybody can answer this, or a number of people. How do you imagine that information, that type of information will be used to influence the community needs assessment? So if you know that if people are expressing that they feel safe, and you're hearing that a lot, how is that influencing the community needs assessment? What are some ways it could be influencing it? I'm going to give you a hint. It has something to do with values, right? That's important to people to feel safe. It's informing what, you see, Teresa's saying, what's Teresa saying?
It's informing that it's working.
That it's working. And that's something important. That could be a reason why people go to that particular program and not necessarily go to another program, right? So this is, again, you know, as Patrick pointed out, how important it is to understand the value of qualitative information, data, and we have to collect data in this way, and that's why this is so important. And to be able to do it in a neutral environment and in a protocol that we're presenting is going to have a huge impact on the community needs assessment.
And Coyley, just want to call out, I think we have 2 more slides left, but we're at our 5-minute.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Dan? I think they had something to say. Dan?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that sometimes it informs what isn't working or what is lacking. So if someone is going to Rise because that's the only place, then that means that maybe other services can be provided to them so that they have more options.
That's really good. Yeah, that's good. Okay. All right, other ideas and thoughts that people have, definitely make sure you put it in the chat. Next slide, please. So just to summarize, we want to make sure that we're welcoming, you know, and people feel comfortable coming to the space at the very beginning. As I mentioned before, even in the recruitment process, we want to make sure that we're acknowledging any virtual challenges or other challenges that may be happening in the space before we get into the space. So we should exhaust that as much as we can so we're prepared to deal with that. We should make sure that people are feeling free and comfortable enough to converse with each other and encourage that. In fact, literally say that, you know, we want you guys to be conversational and, you know, talking, you know, amongst yourselves is perfectly okay in this focus group. We want to encourage you guys to make sure that there's neutral follow-up and that we're pulling out information and data, that we're actively listening and making sure that they know that we're listening. And one way that I've learned to do that virtually is to literally lean in, you know, like changing, like understanding that my role on the screen is actually supporting what's happening, you know, and coming back. So that's important. So that's what active listening is. And we know how to do that in person. Now we all have to practice and make sure that we do that, you know, virtually. It's hard for me to do this. This is something that I've had to work a lot on when I'm in focus groups, is to not let my own opinion show because of my facial expressions and things like that, because I'm pretty animated. And so, you know, and sometimes I'll say that, look, you know, I'm very animated. Don't let, you know, my expressions influence you. You know, that's part of, you know, how I facilitate. I mean, my role is to be neutral. Like actually literally saying that is perfectly okay. It's okay to like call that out, that my role is to be neutral, because it's important for everybody to know that all their opinions are important.
And around the questions, there's a comment from Brenda.
Mm-hmm.
Will there be questions that address the needs that some parents with school-age children may have, like childcare, tutoring, etc.?
Yes, and that's, again, it gets back to the planning for a very specific focus group and making sure the protocol matches that protocol and questions match that focus group. Okay. All right. Next slide. I think we're all learning how to do all of these things, right? The virtual challenges and troubleshooting. I think we're all like understanding that this is going to happen. If it can happen, it can happen. So obviously you want to give yourself extra time prior to the meeting. You want to test all the audio and the video. Actually, I've been in situations where the participants ahead of the meeting, since it's only 6 to 8 people, you can test their audio in a one-on-one with them at some point before the meeting starts to make sure that they're prepared to be in the meeting and have video and everything that they need to participate. Someone mentioned, how, digital divide. We want to make sure that we don't make it impossible for people to participate by not thinking through ahead of time what it's going to require for them to do with that. If there are internet issues and connection issues, we want to deal with that. Background noises. What are there are other, I'm sure, other virtual challenges, and I think that we want to make sure that, we exhaust that when we're in our planning meetings and take care of that. Next slide. So in terms of documenting the focus group, there will be a protocol and a process for documenting. Some of it might be recording. There will be note taking. You might have to have, someone mentioned that they did a focus group where they had somebody taking the notes and one person facilitating. But the documenting obviously is important because if, the whole point of this is to collect the information. And so we're going to have to think that through for each group, making sure that it makes sense for the process. Some of the documenting might take place in the chat room. There also it's going to be important to make sure that people know about confidentiality. I actually like to emphasize it several times in the focus group so that people feel secure about that. It's not just something we say at the beginning and then we never bring it up again, but helping them to understand that it's all confidential and that, the information is not going to be assigned to their name, like anything that's shared. We're not going to say, Tamara said blah, 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 blah in the data collection, that it's all going to be confidential and generalized to that degree. Next slide. So I'm going to have, are there any questions about, before we get into the next steps, I want to use a couple of minutes to give people a chance to ask questions or make comments or about the training that you've gotten today, if you have or additional questions or need points of clarification.
I have a question. My name is Sonia, and I had some challenges with using my Zoom today. So I'm using my cell phone and just talking to you over the phone. And so I wasn't able to follow along with the agenda that you printed out. And I was just wondering, how would we help the participants if they have a challenge like that? What could we do to help them?
Yes, that's very good. So what will happen is the participants will receive a hard copy of everything before they enter into the focus group.
Perfect.
So,
okay.
Yeah, because it's true. Like anything can happen, right? So we want to make sure that we support people and that people aren't feeling left out because they don't have the materials.
Correct.
And also by testing ahead of time, talking to people ahead of time about their challenges, it's going to be important. So if someone said to me that, listen, I'm going to be doing the focus group in my living room, and that's the only space I'm going to have available, then it's our responsibility to support the person in doing that. So maybe saying, hey, do you want us to figure out how to troubleshoot a virtual background for you, or do you need privacy around some things, but really literally working with each person to make sure that they can fully participate. It would be unfortunate to not have someone participate when we could have supported them. So thanks for that question, Brenda. Who else? Anyone else? I thought I saw, did I see another question, Aurelia? Okay, so just so that everybody know, we will be providing for you, particularly if you're going to be recruiting a facilitator or if you're going to be facilitating, you will be getting cheat sheets so that you can, like what I do, for example, like even with this training, I have like hard copies of everything, and then I have my, my notes, like that I prepared myself for, and we'll be walking you through how to prepare for your session very specifically, so you're ready to go and have everything that you need. But make sure that you have your protocol questions. The questions make sense for the community, that it's like not just that it's culturally competent. You want to make sure that it's gender neutral. You want to make sure that it's age appropriate. There are all these things that you're going to have to do to make sure that your focus group is able to collect the information that we need, because it's appropriate for the people who you're collecting the information from. Okay. All right. Next, we have, I think, David.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so in terms of just next steps, and before we adjourn the training, if we have a few minutes left, we can also answer any lasting questions. As you'll see here, our department staff will be reaching out to discuss a few things. One is scheduling support during focus groups. I know we recently had a survey out where community partners can express interest, and we can definitely share that out for those who participated today, just in case you haven't had a chance to look at that. Again, incentives for focus group participants. I think something that someone said earlier today really resonated with me, which is that my time is just as valuable as someone else's. And I think for us, it's really being able to compensate community members if they take the time to be a part of this process. Also, the consent form and demographic form for focus group participants. I know it's something we've been working with Quayle and the HTA team to develop, as that we can share with our community partners who are interested in getting involved. And lastly, I also want to share a really big thank you to everyone who participated today, especially our board members as well. So I know there was co-chair Inyana, board member Sequeira, and board member Lobos. Really appreciate everyone showing out. And this training is also, as a notice, we've been recording and we'll be sharing with community partners and really just make it available, especially since we know a lot of our community partners were not able to make it. So in addition to sharing the recording, including some of the handouts that were shared by email, and I'll also send, just to ensure everyone got everything, we'll be sending a follow-up email and thank you as well. But like I said, we really appreciate it. I know we have a few minutes left, so in case anyone has any questions, we also want to open it up as well. Okay, well, if there's no any questions, again, thank you for everyone for coming out. We can always be reached at youth@CI, and I'll put it in the chat for now. This is our department email, but again, I'll be following up with everyone with the materials that were shared. That is our city email. And again, thank you for everyone for coming out, and also thank you to Quayle and Aurelio for PowerPoint, managing the chat, and supporting with the training today.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to meet everybody and seeing some of you again. Bye.